being human is hard sometimes. We really do come here with a purpose, and it's not that it's all pre-written, but there are many hard things that we're going to experience. So if we can let ourselves and our parents off the hook, acknowledge the hurt, acknowledge the loss, acknowledge the grief, but then just let it go, give it to God, so much can open up. And I think that that's a really important message to carry with us, so that we can just see our parents as human beings first and foremost.
I don't know a lot of people that have taken on the task of teaching people how to be one with themselves, but more importantly, also how to be present in a relationship, and all the things that go with that. And I've kind of determined that there seems to be trauma with a big T, trauma with a little t, trauma with a middle T. And one of the things I've shared publicly is that both in past relationships and even new ones as they came up along my lifetime, it's almost like a trigger to trigger. And then you spend 2 or 3 days trying to unwind triggers before you get back to baseline, before you can communicate. And I'm curious to know what's actually going on with us when all that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, relationships, we think on the outside that they're to make us happy, and that we're going to have this Disney fairy tale with somebody, but really unconsciously we're seeking closure. We're seeking closure for all of the wounds that we incurred early on in our lives, maybe in childhood, in our teen years. And we're seeking the love that we never got from our caregivers as well. And so much of our seeking in adult relationships is actually rooted in lack and in something that wasn't fulfilled. So we're trying to close a loop, and we can't help but project either, right? All of the beliefs and stories that we've inherited from our family system and from our own relationship patterns. And so we get into a relationship, and all of a sudden it all gets brought up because the stakes are high.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing like an adult, intimate, romantic relationship to trigger that family system stuff. You're basically recreating that container where your helpless inner child, or your wounded inner child, or your scared inner child wasn't heard, wasn't seen, wasn't validated. And so now as an adult, you want to make sure that that voice does get heard, seen, and validated. But the strategies that we've developed in order to try to get those needs met are just really not that successful.
Well, and the crazy part is I think most of us, obviously so much of it's happening in the subconscious spectrum. I don't think I became aware of the term masculine and feminine energy until like 2 years ago, polarity 2 years ago, different types of trauma mechanisms. I think they call it FTS, FST, EDR. Like there's all these different modalities, I guess, that's supposed to help us get rid of I would call it junk. It's all information. It's all love, right? It's my good buddy Henry Marr would say it's not about how you feel. It's about how you feel, about how you feel, and trying to like really unpack that to apply it, especially if you're already in a committed relationship. And, many of my relationships, I'm just being public with the audience, prior to now have been this rapid romance phase, like a 6 or 7 months and like just everything's awesome and wow, and then a very quick 6 or 7 months of back down the roller coaster. And I think as adults we all expect that we're going to have ebbs and flows in relationship. I don't think anybody goes in, maybe I'm wrong, but most of us understand that relationship is going to have conflict from time to time. But some conflict swings seem rapid, or like, pretty large swings. And I shared with you through Instagram that I'm honest with the public today. One of the things that I've been working on for probably 3 years now is the abandonment wound.
Yeah.
Early on, my parents were fighting their own battles and were largely out of the picture. And my grandmother raised me for a little while, and then my mother and father came back into the picture after she passed away, and then split my brother and I off, and then and then it created like really interesting. I think subconsciously I didn't realize at the time, but I kept thinking, what's wrong with me that they don't want to stay?
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's actually carried into my relationships as an adult.
Mhm.
And, I share with you via Instagram, this is one of those things I really want to try to unpack, because I feel like what I'm seeing around me is I'm definitely not the only one with an abandonment wound. Most of us seem like that is a core of, if you have 2 or 3 core subconscious programming pieces, that is like one of the top 3 in almost every case.
Yeah, and I mean, you said it too. With all that they were doing, you were wondering what's wrong with me that they would want to leave. And that's something that I wish all adults understood about children, is that children interpret our behavior to mean something about them.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if it has nothing to do with them. It always internalizes. And so, if we could start at the root, if we could start
Yeah.
with the conscious parenting root, then a lot of this would be a lot better in the world. So I'm passionate about that too. But as adults, what we're doing is we're sort of reparenting, and we're redoing some of those stories. And the abandonment wound is a tough one because so many of us carry it for a multitude of reasons, and it can be really sneaky and covert, and it can come out in all sorts of different ways. But ultimately, it's this root fear of there being something wrong with us, or if people see who we really are, then they're not going to want to be with us, or people always leave. And so I'm just going to push you away. I'm going to test you until the straw
Yeah.
breaks, that kind of energy. So it comes out in all sorts of ways. But ultimately, these strategies that we use just keep us at arm's length from love. And we all want to have healthy love, but most of us don't know how to do it because, like you said, a lot of us come from really painful pasts and stories, and just like mine, just like yours. And so as adults, relationship is harder when you have
Mm-hmm.
that history. When you don't have a secure map, when you don't have the nervous system imprint of secure love, consistent attachment, responsiveness, trust, respect, it's just going to be harder. And so we have to do more work in order to find our way into a secure connection. They call it earned secure in attachment speak, right? Because you're
Mm-hmm.
not born secure. You have your attachment wounds that
Yeah.
you have, that you bring into a relationship, and then you earn your secure attachment. And so that's what I'm doing, that's what you're doing, and it's totally possible. It's just a lot of work, and it can be tiring. And we have to adjust our expectations too, that, it's going to be easy right away, or that if we just have a few tools that it will all just melt away. Chances are, if you have some deep patterns with the person, if you have a lot of passion and chemistry with the person, you're probably the perfect match for their wounds, and they're the perfect match for yours. That's usually what the explosive honeymoon phase that you were talking about really represents. And so when you say, get this quick, short, powerful honeymoon phase, and then we take a nosedive, what you're talking about is going from the honeymoon phase right into what we call power struggle. And the power struggle is when both of our unmet needs, our childhood wounds get evoked. And that's where a lot of deep work can happen, but it's also where most explosions happen.
Yeah.
And either we just fight to exhaustion, or we go into a dead zone where we give up on the relationship, we stay together, but we live separate lives. Or we can really dive in that power struggle phase and do the work and become an ally in our partner's healing, understand our wounds, understand what's happening for our partner, and then ride those waves. And then we go through seasons together. And that in a relationship, I've been in a marriage now. We've been together almost 10 years. We've been together for 9 years now. And next year is that 10-year cycle for us. So we're watching how we go through summer, and then we go through spring, fall, winter. And we went through a winter, I'd say over the last couple of years, where there was a lot laying down to die because we had just had a child. Our whole relationship was totally uprooted. Everything that we understood and knew was different now. And so I think what happens for a lot of couples is we go through these dark winters, but we don't anticipate that as a normal part of the relationship. So we think, oh, there's something wrong, we need to end it. And so my hope is that we can all learn tools to work with our minds and those stories and those fears when we're in winter, so that we can get through the other side and then go through the seasons together. And,
Yeah.
sometimes they're cold and sometimes they're warm and abundant.
Yeah. I think I call it the dance. It's a bit of a dance, right? So what I alluded to earlier is obviously a trigger's a trigger. And so if I try to give you an example, if all of a sudden you've been really close to your partner and you're used to spending a lot of, not, I don't say a lot of time together, but quality time. So if you invest an hour, it's an hour of, hey, we're talking, we're communicating, we're planning, we're building, we're dreaming of the future. We're doing these types of things. And then you might go the rest of the week and may not have much like direct interaction, right? You're going through life, you're raising kids, you're, trying to pursue a career, you're doing all these types of things. And then you go through another season where all of a sudden that 1 hour is now seemed to be like a stretch, or like it's getting pulled to be a stretch. And the abandonment style, from what I've seen, my initial knee-jerk trigger reaction is to try to grasp and pull, right? And I've been through enough things now to know that that's the last thing I need to do. I've kind of determined to stand still, right? Neither pull or try to drift if I can help, try to drift backwards, but then that can trigger someone else's trigger, basically. If you start to grasp, all of a sudden that person may feel like, especially if they're anxious avoidant, they feel like they need to pull back the other direction, right? I was wondering if maybe you could help us understand some of the attachment styles and how they relate and interconnect, because it's one of the things I've been studying recently, because I want to get a firm handle on, because that'll help me respond better in the moment when triggers are happening, is by understanding the different styles.
Yeah, there's a great book by one of my teachers, Dr. Diane Poole Heller. It's called The Power of Attachment. I highly recommend that book if you really want to dive into attachment styles and understand how they are at play in our relationships. And what you're speaking to is, pretty classic attachment stuff that happens. We get activated, and our response, if we don't have secure attachment, is either to chase, pursue, push love away, or withdraw and avoid. So we have sort of like the ambivalent style, which is like the anxious, or we have the anxious avoidant, where we're very afraid, and so we withdraw. Fearful, we're afraid to be wrong, we're afraid to be seen, or we're avoidant, where it's quite hard to access that emotion. It's more difficult to put ourselves in a position of vulnerability. And so it can look like the avoidant doesn't care. This is one of the hardest pieces with the anxious avoidant dance, is the anxious person is very expressive generally and very in pursuit. And the avoidant is, have you heard of Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt? They wrote the book Getting Love You Want. They're elders in this space, and actually just interviewed them. He's now in his 80s, and they have a model for this, which they call the turtle and the hailstorm, right? Which is a really great analogy. If you imagine, the hailstorm, that's that pursuit energy, that's that explosive, expressive, demanding energy. And then you have the turtle. And what's the turtle going to do when it starts hailing out? Well, they're going to go into their shell. It's just this natural thing. And so the work then is understanding not just, okay, that's my attachment style, right? Like, sure, that's useful, but why? And understanding yourself, but also understanding your partner. Like, what happened for my partner in their family system when there was conflict?
Yeah.
Because one of the challenges for the person who is the hailstorm is very self-focused in those moments, because you're more in contact as a hailstorm or as an anxious type. You're more in contact with your discomfort, right? You're more in contact with what's happening. And so there's like this urgency to get rid of that sensation, to get rid of that discomfort. And the way that we
super uncomfortable in the nervous system, super uncomfortable.
Yeah. What does it feel like for you if you were to describe it?
I would actually feel like it's a volcano that's about to explode, not necessarily in anger.
Yeah.
But it feels like, and I'm just being honest with my audience, because, and you, it feels as if, and it doesn't happen very often. It used to happen all the time, through my young adulthood. And it would happen in business, it would happen in relationship, it would happen all the time. Now it happens every so often, but when it does happen, it's really, really strong.
Yeah.
I got triggered last night, honestly, with something that was happening within the house and whatnot. And I literally had to go, and I had to stop. I had to release the energy by movement. So that's one of my tools. I try to move. So in this particular case, because it was late and the kids were home and stuff, and my fiance was out of town, it was one of those situations where, all right, I clean the house. Like
Mhm.
the thing is spotless. Look, it looks great. So good on me, right? The other thing I did is I went from that stage straight into getting all the kids put to bed, right? Getting them where they have to go, getting them ready for school in the morning, kind of set aside to get ready for school in the morning, and then turn right around and threw my earbuds in and did a 90 minutes, almost 2 hours of meditation.
Wow, that's great.
Like and I use some of there's a warrior meditation because I'm a big warrior guy. I'm obviously I come across as fairly masculine, which is good for me. But then there's also the piece of Dr. Joseph Murphy, which is it's a
Mhm.
repetition.
Mhm.
Sometimes it'll be frequency music. Like I try to use tools that calm my spirit because I know that if I act out when activated or triggered, that the result is always going to be negative.
Mhm.
And I don't want a negative result. So therefore I have to start playing on my tools, you know? So how do people become aware that they've been activated?
Well, I mean, you just described it perfectly too. You're in tune with your sensations. So, in a lot of my containers and in my work, we focus on what's happening in the body. And we focus on doing a lot of work to be in touch with that on a daily moment to moment basis. And it's not about being stuck in constant psychoanalysis, but being able to tune into, did I just say analysis? It's about being able to tune into, what's happening when I'm feeling really good.
Mm-hmm.
Do I understand what's happening in my body when I'm feeling relaxed? Can I tune into that sensation? And then can I notice what's happening when I'm feeling activated? Is my breathing changing? Do I feel sensation somewhere? Um, is there heat? And so getting in touch with that, that's obviously going to help you notice when something is shifted. And then also, of course, there's just the emotional rise that happens.
Yeah.
And so it's important to know that and know what you can do. But it's also important that if you're in relationship, that you have a bit of teamwork happening,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because once you get into a relationship, you've now taken on their soul lessons and they've taken on yours.
Mm.
There's this individualistic rhetoric in relationship space, and especially in the spiritual space, that it's all up to you and your work is your work and that's it.
Yeah.
And I don't really subscribe to that, because if you're going to be in a partnership, if you're going to merge, especially if you think about long-term relationship, marriage, you're basically saying like, hey, I'm with you in this life.
Yeah. I'm becoming one.
Yeah, and if you get married, you're taking on their whole lineage, like taking my husband's last name for me is just such a heavy thing, because I'm now taking on the healing work of his ancestors. It's
Mm-hmm.
big. And so I think stepping out of this individualistic frame is important so that we can realize, okay, if I'm going to be in this relationship, whatever their work to do is now my work to do, and vice versa. So I want to understand what's happening for my partner so that I can have empathy and compassion, so that if I feel like they don't care, or if I see them withdrawing, or I see them moving away, or I see them disappearing when the emotions are high, I can start to contact their own conditioning, their
Mm-hmm.
own inner child, and what it was like for them. Usually avoidance in their family system, it wasn't safe to have feelings. It wasn't safe to have emotions. It was chaotic around them. And the way that they learned to survive wasn't by some way disappearing or withdrawing or staying out of the way, or somebody else in the family had so much expression and they were taking up so much space that there was no room for them. So they learned that they didn't matter. And so
Yeah.
for them to have a voice, it's really difficult. Now, the funny thing is we always tend to attract each other, right? My husband is the turtle, I'm the hailstorm. And so it's just how it goes.
Yeah.
And so if we don't understand, okay, this is what they were dealing with, then we can't really have much compassion. We got to step out of our own stuff for long enough to be able to pause, notice what's happening in our bodies, and then shift so that we can come back to the dynamic in a more secure way, so that that person can then also co-regulate with us and have the space to show up differently as well. And we should both be working on that. But generally speaking, in a dynamic, you just need one person to do that at a time. So I would say in my marriage, Ben and I often take turns. If one of us is kind of out of our center, the other person's going to hold it down. And we can flow in that. There's no one person who's responsible for holding space, as they call it, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a practice. It's not this like one and done thing. And it really does come down to, am I in my body or am I up here, right? Am I in my head? Am I thinking about all of the ways that I'm right and they're wrong? Am I trying to manipulate my way into this or out of this conflict? Or am I really feeling? Am I actually present? And am I sharing feelings and expressing desires or needs in a way that my partner can hear? Or is this coming from a wound and it's turning into, an attack or blaming or complaining, which generally does not work.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the show. Steven Scoggins here. I've got something that I think is absolutely going to blow your mind. Imagine taking your life and your business to the whole another level. I'm talking about an 8-figure level and beyond. You see, you've been working your butt off to build your business to where it is now. But what if you could work smarter, free up more time, make more money and impact along the way? How much would that be worth to you? You see, I can prove that basic steps, basic mindset shifts, and subtle changes can make the biggest difference. I want to introduce you to the 8-figure mindset makeover. It's absolutely free and it's here for you. It's a powerful summary of my top strategies that help propel me from the streets, if you will, to upwards of 9 figures and quote unquote success as we like to chase it. This is more than just tips though. It's a complete mindset overhaul with simple hacks that you can apply today to begin working on your unprecedented heights in your own business. I would like the honor to share these types of things with you that turn my dreams into reality so you can experience the same type of joy and freedom that I now get to live out in my own day. In other words, it's time for you to build your own unstoppable enterprise. And if you're really ready to take it to the next level and elevate your life and your business, this is an absolute game changer for you. So if you want to take advantage of this free resource, simply go to the show notes and click the link, or you can go to stevenscoggins.com/8-figure. That's stevenscoggins.com/8-figure. Until then, much love. God bless. Let's get back to the show. Take care.
I think the difficulty with and maybe I'm going to learn quite a bit from you and your hubby. Because I feel like even now I probably have the similar dynamic. One's the hailstorm, one's the turtle.
Yeah.
Is if you're the hailstorm, how do you show up in a way that creates safety for the turtle? And if you're the turtle, how do you show up in a way that creates safety for the hailstorm? Right? To allow time to grow, right? Because you're both dealing with nervous system issues that are literally elevating, like it's almost like it takes over the body. If that makes sense. Yeah. And I know when I've been, triggered or whatever, I just feel like I got to get the energy out. And sometimes it's through, creative writing. I've been known to send a lengthy email, and really well, it's a lot out of love and worded well. And then, and then the other person's like, then there's like a defense. It's like, well, I'm defending all the points. And I'm like, I'm trying to let you know how I feel, these types of things. So what are some of the ways in which we can show up? Because I feel like I could be wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But if you have two people who genuinely love each other, like they love each other and they want to see each other win, they want to see each other be successful in whatever their endeavors are, they have that. And they're both willing to do independent work and they're both willing to do work. Like then it can become beautiful and intimacy can be blossom informed. That's kind of how I see it. So how do you go from one extreme where all of a sudden a trigger's triggering a trigger to, okay, we're going to agree that this is our baseline and this is how we kind of proceed forward?
Mm-hmm. I think it's important to co-create a vision for that container too. Before you even get into, how do we do it? Do you both have a similar shared vision for what you want from the relationship? Like, do you both really want to heal this pattern? Do you both see yourself as co-creators of it? Or is one of you seeing the other as the problem, right? Because that mutual co-creation is what's happening in all of our relationships. But there is a tendency to blame. And so both of you have to get on the same page and decide, okay, we want to change this pattern.
Yeah.
Together. And of course, you can decide on your own and start making changes. But your partner may or may not show up to the dance. Yeah. And so that will be clarifying as well. But let's say you want to co-create this and you're both like, okay, let's do this. So you create a shared vision. Here's what I experienced as a child. Here's what was happening for me in my home during conflict. And you can both share that and really get a deeper understanding of, okay, this is what that person was dealing with. So when when I see you pulling away from me or shutting down, I'm not going to focus on being a victim of your withdrawal. I'm going to start to hold and see you as, little whoever, little Sarah, let's say, little Sarah in her family system, where there was so much chaos around her that she had to withdraw and pull away and avoid. And that's how she stayed safe. So when we see Sarah now doing that, we can say, okay, I can see that tender, innocent, scared little Sarah is here. So I need to hold compassion for that. And so when we step out of that, then we've claimed our adult self in that moment, because now we're in that space. And so we can tune into what's happening for us. So what's happening for you? And so then you can say, okay, well, what I really need right now is to feel safe, and I don't feel safe, and I have this volcano in my chest. I feel like I'm going to explode. So what I used to do, when Ben and I were working on this pattern, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, is we would take a pause, and I would say, okay, I'm going to go and self-soothe now, because he was in a place where he wasn't actually able to hold space yet. And so I would go and I would lay down in bed, and I would close my eyes, and I would guide myself through an inner child meditation that I actually ended up sound engineering. It's on my website now for free because it was so helpful for me. And I would guide myself through that, and I would self-soothe until I came back to a place of feeling safe and regulated in my own body. And it was interesting to watch, as I did that, as I started to take more responsibility instead of leaning into him, and, giving him lectures and demanding that he show up and telling him he's not, doing the work because he's avoiding. As I kind of just went into my own space, he started to feel safer to show up, and he just started to be able to be present in the conflict. And now we don't have that happen, right? We don't have conflicts like that at all. Our nervous system attachment styles have shifted over many, many years of work. We still have plenty of stuff to work on, but that is something that we don't deal with now. And I think what's important to remember in these times is that, what's really coming up for both of you is fear. It's just expressed very differently. And at first, the hard thing is that like I said before, the person who is the hailstorm, the person who's anxious, you're always like a little more in touch with your feelings and with what's happening. So there's more urgency, more desire to fix it. The avoidant is like a little further away, right? They're avoiding. So they're not even in their feelings, even though they have anxiety and fear. And that's what they're avoiding. So they're just like a little more pulled back. So it can feel frustrating because you're like, why do I always have to be the one to go first? Why do I always have to be the one to extend? But that in a relationship dynamic where you both do want to do the work to shift it, sometimes you just have to take that on. You just have to say, okay, well, that's the role that I'm going to play. I am going to be the one to extend, or I'm going to be the one to make the shift and give space to my avoidant. And so it can be as simple as, I can see that you're overwhelmed right now. I'm going to go take space and take care of this for me. And, we can come back together in an hour or something like that, right?
Yeah.
For the avoidant person, it's about agreements. My husband used to always need to leave. When we were in our honeymoon phase, when we were first together, we'd get in after we got out of that, about a year in, we start having all of this conflict and power struggle. And he would just want to leave. And it would stress me out. And so we agreed that when
that would trigger the abandonment program, wouldn't it?
Well, absolutely. And so we agreed that when he needed to take space, he would tell me, okay, I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to be back in 1 hour. And so he had a right to remove himself and to take what he needed, but he also had a responsibility to be in communication, to tell me, okay, I'm going and here's when I'm going to be back.
Yeah.
And so then I could say, okay, and during that hour, I will take care of me. Right. And so, these are the kinds of strategies. It's like, how can I lean in just even 10% more? I can still do the pattern. Let's say I have to leave. I have to leave the room when I'm triggered. I'm not able to stay yet. That's my avoidant adaptation. Okay. If you're not ready to stay, at least then say, I need to remove myself and I'll be back when, and make a commitment to your partner when you're going to come back. And these are the ways that we inch our way towards secure until you get to a point where you sort of see through it, and you've been doing it for so long that it's it just, the pattern sort of melts away as you keep contacting those sensations and you get more and more comfortable just being with, right? In a lot of my programs, people come in, we have a container where we do nervous system work all around relationship anxiety for like 4 to 6 months straight.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things I always say is, you're not going to have a huge experience here. You know, this is not like a Tony Robbins event where you're going to be like riding these highs and lows.
Yeah.
Because that's not what we're patterning in the nervous system. What we're patterning in the nervous system is calm, regulation, and attunement so that you can respond. If you have fear, you can trust it. Your survival instincts are there for a reason. We don't want to eliminate them, right? But you're going to learn how to just feel content without having the chaotic highs and lows, right? And over time, we learn to be with the discomfort for longer and longer periods. So like you said, that volcano. So imagine what it might be like if you feel that volcano sensation and you're like, I have to get rid of this. And like you think in your mind, okay, well, it must be something she needs to do. She needs to show up a certain way for this volcano to feel better. What if you said, okay, I'm just going to be with this volcano for 10 more seconds on my own and I'm going to breathe through it. I'm going to talk to the volcano, right? And then you give 10 more seconds and then you give another minute. And then slowly over time, that turns to 5 minutes, to 10 minutes, to half an hour, to an hour. And then slowly that sensation, because you've made friends with it and you've gotten comfortable being with, you've widened your capacity, it doesn't actually feel like a trigger anymore to the extent that it did before. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. Makes a ton of sense. And you know, I think that's where, you know, having healthy tools comes into play. You know, one of the things by the way, just for the audience's sake, Becoming the One, I don't care who you are, it's a phenomenal book. I know it's been out a little while, but it is so rich and so full. Like seriously, there's so much in here. And one of the things I just want to applaud you on is the transparency that you use to communicate the topics and points of your own life. That level of vulnerability is I feel like is what leads to victory in other people. It's just being able to be honest. And I don't know, I just wanted to say that because again, this is probably a book I'll probably read 2 or 3 times personally. And I know I know the vast majority of your audience historically is serving women, and I serve men and women, but as a man who wants to be a healthy masculine male, inside out and also in relationship, like it's phenomenal, honestly.
Thank you.
I want to pivot the conversation a little bit if it's okay. I highlight I got a lot of underlined and highlighted stuff in the book. We don't have enough time to go through it all, but you make a statement in here. You said the healing path often spurs or appears when everything else has been stripped away, and that has been my life truth.
Yeah,
and I'm very curious how that could show up in someone's life today, so they can become aware that, hey, you're actually not out of sorts. You're actually falling into a healing pattern.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a crossroads. You know, it's really a choice. So when we get to the path, we usually find our way to healing work through some sort of loss or crisis or heartbreak. But we always have a choice. We can go down the path of bitterness. We can make it everybody else's fault, or we can say, you know, life just doesn't work for me. Or we can say, you know, what is this opportunity for? What am I here to learn? What did my soul come here to learn? I approach life from that perspective always. You know, I have this belief that our souls do come here with a purpose of learning and healing and growing. And there are certain experiences that, you know, are really painful, that don't really make sense. But for some reason, we've come here to have them. Yeah. And so, you know, in those moments, we can be with that. And I don't always think everything happens for a reason. You know, I think that can be oversaid in the spiritual realms. And sometimes maybe that's not true. But regardless, it's happening. And so what are you going to do with it? That's what I say. You know, if it doesn't make sense, well, we can't make sense of everything. But we do have to respond. And how we show up for life is going to determine what comes next. And so when we are in a crisis or a heartbreak or a loss or things are not working out for us, then it's time to do an examination of, you know, what are the things that I'm grieving? What am I grieving from my past that I have not yet let myself grieve?
Yeah.
Oftentimes, especially with a breakup, for example, breakup feels overwhelmingly painful and you can't get out of bed and everything feels like it's falling apart and you're just dying inside. Chances are you're grieving a lot more than that relationship. And so this is where, past hurt comes up for review.
There's so many different directions I want to go. I'll tackle this one. Let's assume for a second that one of the the one core theme of the book that I read is do the work on you and good things will happen. Right. So take yourself seriously, accept your wounded child, integrate the things you can, or integrate everything as obviously as a life journey. You set yourself in the best possible potential to essentially win in a relationship or with self, including loving self. So I had this affirmation, my audience has heard me say this before, that I do pretty much every day, 3 times a day. And it's an integration that I've done with, it came out, I was doing a bit of an energy kind of like, therapy work, with somebody kind of was gifted in the energy space. And honestly, that's been some of the most successful stuff that I've done, even outside of traditional therapy.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that kept coming up was this desire to love self, right? So, so I say, I'm healthy, I am wealthy, I am wise, I'm a steward of the Most High, and I love you, Stephen. I added, I love you, Stephen, last year. And it was funny when I was doing a friend of mine sent me a bit of a survey of sorts, like a questionnaire. And on the questionnaire, it's like, what is your opinion of yourself or something along those lines? And I've just said, I love myself. Not in a prideful, arrogant way, but I lovingly accept my triggers, my faults, my strengths, my talents. I accept it all. And because I'm going to continue working on my triggers and my blind spots and my struggles, I'm going to do that regardless of whatever relationship I'm in or not in, because that's what's right for me, you know, and that's how I feel like we kind of get to that healing stage. I say all that to say that I don't have a background of physical abuse, or I've had a lot of mental and emotional stuff, like which in some cases I think
It's very, very impactful.
Yeah, they're very impactful in general. But one of the things I'm dawned on that I see a lot of there's been a lot of folks who have been physically injured. Physically injured by abuse, physically injured by sexual abuse, all these different types of things. And I can't imagine what that must be like on the nervous system of the person who withstood it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I'd like to learn how to navigate is how to show up in a loving, compassionate way without showing up as what's the best way to explain it? A lighter version of myself, almost like a super compassion, like not overly compassionate. My friend Henry that I mentioned before would say that you always show up in truth and love.
Yeah.
Kind of that the two are mutually connected. And when you do it that way, then essentially you're showing up as a healthy man, healthy masculine. Yeah. What would you say to someone because I think the good news is there's a shift coming. There is a shift that's been going for probably a few years now. And it's just getting bigger, of people who want to operate in healthy feminine, healthy masculine, and who know that they go in and out of different energy spectrums on a regular basis. What would you say to someone who is maybe in the healthy masculine realm, who is trying to lovingly support their partner, who may have had that in their background?
Yeah, I mean, the abuse stories are just so hard to hold and not just for the person holding them, but for the partner too, because it really is this like horrible grief and horrible loss of what was supposed to be divine love and protection. Right. And that often finds its way into a relationship in really difficult ways. It's really hard to be in relationship when you had a severe rupture and you had a serious loss of divine love and protection. And so to be able to hold that requires not only the partner be loving, compassionate, but also boundaried. You can't save or rescue your partner from their pain. And it requires them to do a lot of deep soul work and nervous system work, because the body is holding all of that memory. body is holding that trauma. And it often will manifest as illness, as autoimmune disorders, as exhaustion, as pain. I too myself, had that in my history just from so much psychological trauma, and abandonment trauma, dealing with pretty serious hormonal imbalances and chronic pain, to the point where I almost couldn't get out of bed for weeks sometimes, while I was on my healing journey. And so it is a lot of work to do that. And, but it is possible. There's the work of Peter Levine, the body and the Waking the Tiger, somatic experiencing. That's the work that I weave into all of my containers. So we have somatic experiencing practitioners and therapists on our team who come into all of our containers and do SE work, because what I've seen is that it just moves the needle. And like anything else, it really is transformative for helping the nervous system and the tissues release that past trauma, that stored memory. And then also, there's this piece around re-mending our own hearts. Because when we're young and we have this serious violation against us and this loss of divine love and protection that is so, so important to us, we can go through life feeling as though there's something deeply wrong with us, that we're broken. And that is just heartbreaking, as a mother now to a little being. It's brought up so much for me in my own family history, because if you've read my books, so my mother has a story that is quite horrific in terms of her own childhood story. And so there's an element that I like to weave in for all of us too, which is the earth-based elements. If the human mother has failed you, can you find solace and love and connection in the earth mother? And so I weave in, working with the elements, going outside into the forest with bare feet, going and dipping in the river, swimming in the oceans. Just being connected to nature is so healing. We know this. I mean, there's zillions of scientific studies, but I'm not going to cite any of them because I don't think that they're that important. I think all of us have had the experience of feeling stressed or feeling worried and going out into nature and feeling better. And there's a reason for that. So, when we're working with serious childhood abuse and abandonment, in addition to all of the therapeutic modalities that are, human-led, I like to invite us all to tap into the nature-led healing modalities as well, and lean on those as resources for you. And I have a bunch of meditations and rituals in my Becoming the One journal. I don't know if you ever got that.
I did. I was very grateful for that. Came with the book. It sure did.
Right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. And so inside that journal, that's where you get more of the nature-based practices and connection tools that I'm talking about.
No, and I'm so glad you shared that, because I think if everyone becomes aware of the fact that there's stuff that could be healed, and if it could get healed and resolved, that they could live freer, healthier, better lives in general. And there's different levels, right? So you find one thing and you can kind of work through that. And you go to the next thing and work through that. And I think one of the things that's interesting to me about this work is it seems like it's lifelong. It's not really a one and done. It is a true journey. As I've been walking through the times that I've been triggered this last year, and there hasn't been many, but there's been enough to have my attention, right? And they all have the abandonment common denominator.
Yeah.
Right. So now I'm more aware now than ever. Like, we'll finish this session here, and I'm going to run to a therapy appointment.
Nice.
Just to kind of like I'm going to solve this, just get the heck out of my system. Right. Because, and it's what's right for me. It's also ultimately becomes what's right for my partner, but again, I'm doing the work for me, not to earn the respect and admiration of a partner, because that's, if you start, for me, at least at the times that I've tried to change me to get the attention of a partner, it always falls apart. It's never right. It's never consistent. It's never congruent. There is no integration. The only time it's ever worked is like, okay, I see you, little booger. I'm coming after you. Like, we get you out of my system. I was also had this thought now that, so I did a buddy of mine, same Henry, ironically, Henry keeps coming up. About a year and a half ago, I met with him, and I just exited a company. I was in the process of exiting a company and whatnot, and had gone through a significant life transition 6 months earlier, and I was like, sat down with him and we were having a conversation. He's like, I'm like, da 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 da. He's like, he just starts laughing. I'm like, bro, I just put my heart on it. Like, what are you doing? He just starts laughing. He goes, oh, dude, your life is going to be totally different this time next year. Totally different. And he was totally right, which was kind of funny. But the reason I bring that up is because there was a lot of healing last year at different teams. So one of the things that I do now, if there's a significant life transition upcoming or outgoing, is I'll take a 2-week sabbatical and I'll go somewhere. I'm actually living in Utah now, when I spent my entire life in North Carolina, because I came out here for sabbatical. And as I'm coming down the mountain, I hear 2 things: move to Utah, one, and then your business will sell quickly now. And it sold 5 months later after I spent 3 years trying to sell it.
Wow.
Right. So I have this trust factor with my inner self. I call it the divine God, Jesus. That's my terminology. That tells me when I'm in a position of listening. But I can't listen when I've been triggered or when I've got that going on.
Yeah. Well, and what was the environment for you where you received that message? Like, were you in the mountains or were you?
I was.
Yeah. And
mountains are my spiritual place for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah. And that's what I'm talking about, right? It's like, oh, well, I notice when I'm in the mountains, then I am able to hear the messages, and that to me is where we can see that we are divinely held, and by whatever source feels true for you. For you, it's God or Jesus, for me, it's the elements. And for all of us, it's something. And that's important to connect back to. Just knowing, whatever has happened to you in this life, you're not alone. You are loved and held innately, just for being who you are. And it's taking that time to quiet and listen to that voice. And so when you did that, that's really profound to know. And now you have that resource always.
I actually can drive from my house to that same mountain with a 15-minute drive and have done it twice this year.
Wow.
Just to go here. And, in theory, you can hear in your office, you can hear in your home, but for some reason, I just hear clearer up there.
Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful thing to know. And for me, it's the forest. And, 3 years ago, my husband and I, we bought 10 acres and we live in the forest now. And I remember walking in those early days through the forest and just being in tears, being like, okay, my life is complete. There's nothing left for me to strive for. This is it for me. I've made it. And just being in this place surrounded by trees was what helped me heal so much too, just that deeper level of a nervous system healing. So it's pretty powerful when we put ourselves in environments that our body says yes to what can happen, that listening and that magic, like how quickly your company sold and how easeful everything felt for you. So really cool to hear that.
I got one final question before we wrap up. And this, I'm going to turn over to you. Is there something that's been in your spirit, your soul, that you have yet to communicate to the world that you feel like the world needs to hear? And if so, what would it be?
It's a wonderful question. There's been something that I have been learning and downloading since I had my daughter. And the first year of her life was really intense for me. I felt like I was just half in the world for the whole year. And one of the things that I was learning was that we, like I said before, with these soul contracts, we really do come here with a purpose. And it's not that it's all pre-written, but there are many hard things that we're going to experience that for some reason our souls came here to experience. And it doesn't matter if we have the best mom and dad in the world and they do everything they can, we're still going to have those hard experiences. So for me as a mother, there was so much grief because I was like, okay, I had this plan, I negotiated this soul contract. I thought, okay, we're going to have such a great, perfect life. Like I'm going to protect her from all the heartache in the world. And I'm just going to be such a loving, devoted mother that she's not going to have any negative patterns. And then as soon as she was born, I start getting these teachings and it's like, no, that's not how this works.
Yeah.
Like you're here to support and love and preserve essence, but the rest is totally up to her and her soul. And so it also showed me, in our culture, especially with the healing work, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves, but also a lot of blame on our parents. And they're only a small percentage of the heartache that we're experiencing. And the rest is everything else, just being human. Being human is hard sometimes.
Yeah.
And so if we can let ourselves and our parents off the hook, acknowledge the hurt, acknowledge the loss, acknowledge the grief, but then just let it go, give it to God, so much can open up. And I think that that's a really important message to carry with us so that we can just see our parents as human beings first and foremost. Yeah.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. I do want everybody to go grab the book. I also want to go to your website and check out all the different experiences you have to help them honestly navigate this journey, because I have learned the hard way that you cannot do this kind of work on your own. You have to have a guide. You have to have people that have been there, done that, have done the work. And I think that's the whole purpose of mentorship and guides along the way in history, right? It's to help people that are coming behind you with different levels of experience and wisdom. And I also want to share a lot of gratitude that you stepped into this work because obviously you made choices along the way that got you to this stage. You clearly take it very seriously. Your audience absolutely loves you. I'm sure our audience is now who doesn't know you is absolutely going to love you and then obviously engage with you. But I just want to say thank you again for coming on the show.
Thanks so much, Stephen. And thanks for the personal shares today too. I really enjoyed our conversation, and yeah, I'm excited to see what's next for you.
Likewise. All right. Take care.
Thanks.
I hope you liked that video. And if you did, make sure you check out this next video right here.
I'm not bullish on getting paid massively on what you did yesterday. My philosophy is 0, 0, 0. And everybody say, what is that? And I tell them, but I go, it's every day you start at 0. I don't care what you did, I don't care what you did yesterday, I don't care what you did last month. Every single day goes to 0.